Hello, everyone, and welcome to live stream number 2 from my laundry room. This is Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Today we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to be painting a Nebula. So we watched Dallas paint Corvus from his Home Sweet Home last Thursday. If you didn't see that, check out this YouTube channel. It has been posted up, or you can see it on the Twitch archives. Today we're going to be doing a Nebula. Pretty excited to crack into this very terrifying little lady. And get things going. So, let's just get right going because this face screen isn't doing anything for anybody. Alright, here we go. How have you guys all been doing? I hope you had a great weekend. For those of you who went egg hunting, my little one certainly enjoyed it, so hopefully you guys did too. Alright, so here's my Nebula. I'm going to be using the Zenith priming technique that we use a lot on the show. So I have primed her black, and then I did a light gray spray from basically the top 45 down on to bring out all those highlights and stuff. So I'm going to be using probably a couple of different techniques today, primarily washes. So I'm going to go back to kind of our tried and true technique for washing, where I'm going to let that Zenith priming go ahead and bring out some of the details for me. It's going to give me some shadows, it's going to give me some of the highlights. I'm going to be using mostly scale 75s today, although I do have my trusty Vallejo medium as well. So I've got mixing and glaze, so I'll be using that a little bit for making my washes and stuff. But I'm mostly going to go with a pretty traditional, like, common nebula scheme. So I'm going to be doing a lot of purple. So I've got the scale 75 violet, which I'm going to be using. I have the sunset purple from scale 75. These are all from the regular range. This is a really nice kind of vibrant purple, like a true purple. And then we have African Shadow, which is a really great kind of purple brown. So I'm going to use it to shade a little bit. And then for the metallics on her like little armor plates and stuff, I'm actually going to play with this Kunzanite alchemy color, which is like this weird kind of lavendery pinkish hue metal, and it's going to come out more pink than I kind of wanted initially, but once I do kind of a wash or a glaze of purple ink, it'll start to tone it down really nice. I think I haven't played with this one yet, so we're just going to be doing a little experimenting today. Alright, so I'm just going to get started. I'm going to bring up my fancy dancy reference pick that I have. So most of her is largely just the purple color, so I'm going to use the sunset purple just to start. And I'm going to mix in, oh my gosh, or I'm going to throw it on the floor. I'm just going to mix a wash out of it. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to put a lot on my palette. I'm going to take some glazed medium from Vallejo and drop a few drops of that into the well as well. And I want this to be, you know, pretty nice and a thinned consistency. They always say skim milk consistency, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't drink skim milk, so if that works for you, whatever. Give you a shot on my palette here in a second once I get this like mixed up the way I kind of want it. But I'm looking for something that like where the paint really stretches as I use it, because I want all of those colors underneath to really show. But I don't want it so thin that it's not going to cover it all. And so it's kind of it's a little bit of a fine balance between the two. And the thing to remember is that you can always thin a paint out. It's a lot harder to thicken a paint. The only real way to do that is to add more of your base paint in. So, let's see if I can get this on camera here. You can see my really dirty well. So this is the color that I've made up out of that purple. So you can see if I paint it over here how it kind of stretches out. You can still see that white underneath, so it's kind of tinting the color so my schmutz gets in the way. Because I don't clean my palette, like, ever. I let it build up until I have no well left, and then I just go crazy with it. Alright. So, here we go. I'm going to dive right in here. And I'm just going to start blocking out my purples, and we're going to see how this goes. So again, I'm kind of looking for a little bit of a wash consistency, so I want it to stretch nice and even. I'm going to try to avoid the straps as best I can because I don't want it to go on the straps. And the thing is, if it comes out a little too late to start, I can always use more coats to darken it up as well, or I can use a purple glaze to get in there and make that work too. But you can see how, because of the way the wash works, we have already some natural shading and highlighting going on thanks to that Zenith Prime. And so this is just going to save me some time in terms of like blocking stuff out. It's going to let me really like kick in there and do this really quick. And that's what I want. I want to be able to knock this girl out and get her on the table and start playing with her. And I want her to look good while she's doing it too. But, so it's all about finding those tips and those techniques that work really well for you. There's a lot of different kind of washing techniques out there. We went over on the red skull that I finished out last week and painted the Thursday before that. We talked a lot about one of the most classic techniques, which is base coat wash highlight. And that is a great way to get good results pretty quick, and it's a great kind of inroads to new painters. But I like this washing one even better because it just cuts out steps and it looks really nice. The trick is to make sure that you're using some nice vibrant paint because you want a really good color to it. And then, like I said, you can always shift the tones and stuff by using some washes. So like this purple's a little more magenta-y than I was kind of envisioning. Looks more like a very classic Nebula color rather than some of her more modern, darker purple colors. But I can shift that down if I want to by just using some more washes, some darker washes and stuff like that. Or I might just decide to keep it because again, I'm like really feeling this classic Nebula vibe back from like the original Infinity Gauntlet run where she was more of that magenta and that blue. So we'll see. But you get a lot of options, and that's one of the fun things about painting is that you can really play with how things are coming out, how your colors are working. You just have to be willing to kind of take the bravery test and dive back in and mess with it. And then if worse comes to worse, you can always start over, but I always tell people, you know, don't worry about starting over. You can always fix it. There's always a way to kind of bring it back together and bring it back around. And then you have something that's unique. And the process is definitely part of the fun of it. So, blast that. I think I'm pretty close to done on this purple here. So, just like that. I'm going to get down here. I'll miss that. Here by the leg. Like that. Oh, I'm going to get back into the center of the camera. Alright, go back in here, get down by the boot. Get in here, even though nobody will really see that. Underneath side because it's nice and dark. I'm not too worried about getting stuff on the plate, so like these plates here, and then probably the knee pads I'm going to do in that Kunzanite Alchemy. So I don't want to do that. Take a look back at my reference shot here. So her neck brace is kind of black, looks like, but I do want these shoulders to be that purple. So it looks like these get the purple. Just nail that in really quick. And so you can see like how great and how fast you can get really good results in this wash, because like I've done one layer and I've already got nice highlights, nice shades. It's going on really nice. I'm really digging it here. It doesn't take much time at all to just start knocking stuff out. I'm almost done. And like I said, if I want to go back and deepen up some of these recesses or some of the highlights darker, I can do that by just adding another layer, or I can use a wash of a darker purple, maybe that African shadow, and I can go back and hit it up. Just want to saturate some of this stuff up just a little bit more. Get in between there and there. So you just want to watch to make sure that your wash doesn't get too dry. And I will say that certain paints dry out a little quicker than other paints, so it's all about just kind of like knowing how the paint's flowing and stuff. But you'll notice that if your paint gets too dry in your wash, you'll start to pull the wash away, and you definitely don't want that. So you want to be kind of careful. So it's always good to kind of know when to stop and let the wash dry and then come back to it, and you can always fix it up later. But get the underside of the leg that I missed there. And there we go. There's our first color applied. So we've got a nice little purple going on. All right. So my next color, as I let that color dry, I think I'm going to go to my... I'm going to go to the boots, I think. So we're going to do... Oh, looks like I want these gloves before I stop that. This is why reference is so good. It always shows you what you messed up on or missed. So she's got these little like fingerless gloves. So I want those to be that same color as the bodysuit. Come back in. Put these up. Do my best to be kind of nice and clean and avoid getting any on our skin, because the less mess I can make during this stage, the easier it's going to be to use the same technique some of the other stuff later. Going. Piece of something going on there. A little cat hair. Under here. Now, one of the interesting things about Nebula is we've talked a lot about how people kind of like view certain things with more importance, because the eye obviously goes to the face first. So typically you look at a miniature from like the top down. But because Nebula is so up top and this is down here, really her whole body is in focus. So you do want to take that time and make sure that everything looks, you know, nice and good. With everything going on, like even her legs and stuff, so I'm spending a little more time on those than I normally would. Hands, stuff like that, because everything's like kind of right in that hot zone. And her face is looking down because she's looking at her target. So the eyes are going to kind of like go to the face. They're not going to be able to see the face from that angle. So they're going to kind of like, they're going to hit here on the chest. They're going to come up here to the arm. And so kind of spending a little bit more time or the side of the head, spending a bit more time there is going to like net me a lot of really good results. And then obviously like the bottom of the leg, I don't have to care about that much because nobody's ever going to see it unless they even do that. And let's be honest, only I'm going to do that when I'm painting her. So it's kind of like it's zoning in on those areas that are going to be really important to the eye and are going to make all the difference in the world when somebody's looking at them. So go in here and layer in those little chest straps to get that color in. See, there's some stuff over here. Just going to hit that up. Go back in, hit that. A little bit. Do a dark wash right on her back there. That should be a little bit darker. Add a little bit of water. That in. The tops of those shoulders one more time. There. All right, cool. think with that done, I'm going to move on to the boots while I let that dry. For the boots, I want kind of a nice bluish black color that I can use really nice. Go with this Hold the Blue if I can find it. Yeah, this might be the ticket. Let's take a look. How blue is that? Oh, it's pretty blue. Maybe not that one. It's a little too blue. This is the fun part where I just go through all the paints that are off screen, and maybe you can hear them go and maybe you can't. Let's see. Oh, here we go. How's this one going to look? Yeah, I think this will work. Okay. So I can always tone it down a little bit of black. So I'm going to go with this Abyssal Gray, or Abyssal Blue from the scale line. It's like a really dark, coalish kind of blue-black. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to do the same thing on the boots and then the collar. Should look pretty nice, and it will look pretty bright, but that's okay because I'm going to go back over with a black glaze and I'm going to dull it down. So if it looks a little too blue, I can always adjust that by just using a dark glaze over the top of it. So I'm really just looking to tint all these colors. Same idea, just trying to be careful not to get any on my purples. So I don't want that. Come down. My head's getting in the shot because I'm looking really close. Trying to be so careful. So careful. Yeah, get that over there. Those little straps there. Come down here. Like that. The boots, so you can see how I'm just letting that wash kind of do the work. This part's pretty easy because the boots are so much in the shadow areas. There's really not a whole lot of highlighting I have to worry about in general. But anything I would is just going to be taken care of by that wash. So there's the booch. Now this is going to be the big one. It's hitting the collar around the neck. So this is where we're going to see that lightness kind of come through. Where we may decide we want to adjust. Maybe not. I'm trying to play it a little safe here. Let's see if we can get a little more light. Oh, made it so angry. There we go. Bring my lights a little closer so I can see what I'm doing better. Tight spot right next to the neck. Switch out my brushes, go to this purple. Catch this little spot right here that we missed. There. Cool. Alright, 2 colors down. We're rocking and rolling. What do I want the little slide pads to be? Oh, I want those to be black too. We're not quite done with the black. Alright. Easy peasy. I'll stick with this brush. Just because it's in my hand. Come in here. Hit this little thigh pad. Thigh pad. Over. Got light. Those are all like colors. So any kind of medium will give you a lot more time to work with your paint because the medium is basically the extender that's used because they don't use water when they mix paint, so they use a medium. So it's kind of a special formulation. It holds the pigments in. Excuse me, I need to take a drink of my water. But yeah, they're drying retarders, so they slow the drying process of the paint. They also extend the paint, and one of the things that they do outside of water, so water causes the paint to separate, whereas the medium, because it extends those pigments in a more formulaic way, it means that one, your paint has a lot more grip because the medium is thicker than water. So if you ever like thinned out your paints a lot too much with water and then you try to paint with them, you notice how the paint kind of like runs everywhere and it doesn't grab to the surface. It doesn't adhere super well to the surface. So a medium stops that from happening. So it allows the paint to really stretch without losing its adhesion and its cohesion properties because of the water. So it keeps everything kind of together. And it lets those colors get really thin, like maybe you can see right here. How I have this really nice, like bright spot. Now there's still paint there, but it's pulled across that surface area and it's pooling down here because of course that's where the liquidy paint wants to run. But it's still holding together. Whereas if you just use normal water, it would really start to split. As far as the mediums that I use, I mean, there's some great artist mediums. You know, Flow-Aid is a really great one that you can find at any hobby store. That will allow you to basically extend your paint and it extends working times. As far as like mediums for washes and stuff like that, what I typically use are the Vallejo ones. So glaze medium, matte medium. They make gloss mediums, they make satin mediums. So if you want something to come out really glossy, like a gem or something, you can use a gloss medium and you add it to your paint and it will actually make the paint dry glossy. Matte medium obviously will kind of dull down the paint is the idea there. So there's a lot of different mediums and they all kind of do different things. But glaze medium, obviously its kind of primary purpose in life is to help stretch paint out a lot so that it can make like nice glazes. It's really great for making washes and stuff like that. So I use that one a lot. And then matte medium or mixing medium, either one of those, that's kind of like your general all-purpose mediums. And they'll work great for just about anything else. So a little bit of medium and a little bit of water, and you can make all the washes you want out of stuff like that. But that's all a medium is. It's just it's basically just the juice that the paint goes into, that the pigments go into to make a paint. I want this to get covered a little bit more, so we're just going to tap the color in. Tap some color in there. Add a little bit more color over here. Yeah, paint juice. I'm going to get back centered because I'm like starting to sneak away. Stay on target. And now since my purple is dried, I'm just kind of going back through with a thinner coat. And I'm touching up some of the spots that I feel like need a little darkening, want a little bit more life to them. And in order to make sure that it's not going to affect the highlights, I'm adding a little bit more water, which is going to cause that paint to run more. So it really depends as far as like medium to water. So if you're just taking paint out of the pot and you want to just paint with it, you don't want to change its consistency, you don't want to change its flow, you should just add like 1 or 2 drops of water, depending on how much paint you have in there. Or just make your brush wet. Because you always want to add some liquid to paint because it typically doesn't come out of the bottle like perfectly ready to go on smooth. So you want to stretch the paint just a little bit. But if you want to really stretch the paint or you want to extend the working time a lot, then you can add medium. Or you can work on a wet palette if you want to extend working time. So like Dallas last week used a wet palette. A wet palette just keeps the paint wet, allows for a lot of mixing and stuff, and a lot of them have like closing lids and stuff, the fancier ones, and they'll keep your paints wet for a long time because they just maintain the moisture. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. You definitely don't need medium to be able to paint. I painted forever without medium, but for making washes, to make glazes and things like that out of your normal paint, that's when you really want to start using mediums specifically. Every once in a while, I'll use it on a color that I think I want to kind of extend the life for. But because we paint such small areas, and we're not typically doing 10 dudes at once or 10 miniatures at once in a line, just putting enough paint on your palette will make sure that you get through your sections with no big problems. So it's kind of dealer's choice on it. I don't typically use mediums unless I'm looking to make like a wash or a glaze. Otherwise, I'll just use a little bit of water to extend the paint. And by the time that I need to switch the paint, I'm good to go. All right, so I'm going to start doing the straps on her torso and on her legs and stuff. And I'm just trying to figure out what color I want to use to do that. I think we got two options. There's a purple or a red leather that might look pretty cool. Or we can go with more of a purple. I think. Or we could use the African Shadow, which I was going to use for shade, but now I'm thinking maybe no need for the shade, but I could definitely get away with for the straps. And just kind of maintain my overall purple hue here. So let's just experiment. Let's take a look. So sometimes you just got to try things. Sometimes you try things and they work out, kids. Sometimes. Alright, I'm really liking that. So African Shadow is the winner. That is this one right here from Scale 75. I like it. It's exactly what I was looking for, even though I didn't know it. It's got a nice kind of, it's got a very strong purple hue, even though it's brown. It looks real nice in those straps, so I think it plays well with our brighter, more classic Nebula magenta that we got going on here. With that purple sunrise. That's the name of it, right? Purple sunrise? Lost it. Where'd it go? Sunset purple. Oh, it was wrong time of day. It was real close. Real close. Nobody cares. But I do. Sort of. Just going in here, we're just going to hit these up. Try not to ruin my look. I see that I missed a little dot over in this corner here, so I'm just going to hit that really quick with some wash. And I'm going to come in here because I missed some of this. Hit that with the wash. Right there because I missed that with the wash. Great. Okay, back to my sunset. Yeah, in climate, somebody mentioned that they have a wet palette and it still dries out super fast because they're in a super dry climate. Climate matters a lot. Like, I grew up in Great Falls, Montana, which is a bit drier than, definitely drier than the Pacific Northwest. Certainly drier than St. Paul, Minnesota, where I lived a bit after college. In St. Paul, Minnesota, I was like, oh man, it's so moist out here. Like, this is great. My paints are pretty good. I used a wet palette for a while while I was out there, but I was like, I don't really know if I need it. Then I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and I was like, oh, it's very wet out here. So the wet palette's great for like having a lot of time to mix and to play with colors. Especially if you're working with like a limited palette, you want to do a lot of mixing. Because you just make those paints last forever as long as you keep the sponge nice and wet and keep your moisture going. But as far as like paints drying out and stuff, I've never had much of a problem, even in the driest climate I lived in. But I've never lived in like an Arizona climate or a New Mexico, like a true place of really dry, deserty heat. Yeah, I'm with you on the nosebleed thing. We used to travel a lot to the East Coast for different events and conventions and stuff, and every time we'd go like Boston, Rhode Island, like Maine, that area, Northeast in the winter, man, it was like, it's happening. At some point, my nose is just going to erupt in gross, macabre, like blood fests. It was never good, and it never happened at an opportune time, of course. It was always like, I'm having a pleasant conversation. What happened to your face? Like, oh, yeah. It was just a matter of time, but here we are, dealing with it. Alright, so I'm going to continue on with these straps. I think I'm just going to use this for all the straps now, because I'm really liking the color. I'm liking how it's playing. I can go back and kind of highlight it up and stuff. So I'll run over there. Looks like that strap continues right to here. There we go. Come back over here. Be careful with this because I don't want to lose my nice black highlight. So I'm just bracing my finger at this point because I want to really get in there, and because of how I'm kind of like sitting, so I'm just bracing my finger against my stand because it's nice and tall, and I've got that firmly planted on the thing, and that just lets me get right in there super steady and just paint right over. And now because I'm doing this, I'm noticing like places where I missed with my wash, or like little areas of white. And so this is I would say the one downside to using a light primer, is that all of your little areas that you don't get to will show up like little spotlights. If you use a black primer, your color is going to be a lot duller because paint is not opaque, it is translucent. All paint is translucent to some extent. But when you don't hit a color, typically that black will hide it. So the little black dot will make sure that you can't really tell that it got missed. And so that's kind of nice. But white primer or gray primer, like a really light primer, it is unforgiving, man. So you just kind of got to be ready to go back in and hit those little spots if you see them, so you get a nice solid even coverage. I missed some right here by the thigh because I thought the thigh pad went over too much. But that's okay. That's why we mix a little bit extra color and we just keep it in our well. That way, we can go back during this most epic of epic times and color back in. That I was a little concerned about. One more time. So I'm just going back over because my wash is dry now. I'm just going back through and I'm just kind of like deepening up some of the colors. Because again, like this is more like a glaze or like a pin wash. So by being careful to where I apply it, I can just change the values and darken up the tones and stuff like that. I use the same color like over and over. I'm just kind of like building it out. But I'm trying not to go too far because I don't want it to become a solid. I don't want it to become a solid color. I want to maintain that undercoat showing through, so that I get that nice highlighting and shading. So it's just kind of like a little bit of game of working, and if I ever apply too much paint or apply the paint in a way that I don't think works quite right, I can always go in with a clean, slightly damp brush, and I can get any of that paint off. But again, you can only really do that if the first layer has dried, so that's why it's important not to overwork it and to kind of let it dry. And also you'll notice that the colors will shift too as they dry. Like things that you think don't look quite right might turn out looking pretty good afterwards. So all right. So this is actually this is actually a used plastic tub that originally held silicone putty in it. So I used it when I was doing some molding for some custom terrain stuff. When I was building D&D campaign or RPG stuff for a friend of mine. And instead of like making all these bricks, I was just like, oh, I'll just go get some really cheap like hobby silicone putty and make some molds that'll last like 5 seconds out of plaster, but it was long enough. And they're a really great size. So don't throw away your stuff, man. It's there's no reason to, because it always comes in handy at some point. And it's just been an amazing little like handle because it fits my hand perfect, gives me some height, and yeah, it's like the right size for everything. So old pill bottles work great, absolutely. You can cut wooden dowels. That's what Dallas does. Like there's plenty of things. There's plenty of good things. So all right, so that's. Oh, I gotta go back. I want to finish off my straps, my strappy straps. Gotta do this strap here. So let me get these little straps. But the thing that I actually really have come to love about the hobby in general, and this is kind of true of every hobby, although it's a little different. The scale of it changes based on the hobby, you know. The hobby of building cars is a very different scale in terms of the things that you use and stuff compared to like the scale of making miniatures and building terrain. But it's the fact that, you know, you get to reuse so many things that a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's garbage. It's not really useful. Like, what are you going to do with that? Just throw it away. And yet, you know, you can look at an old watch, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, there's so many good potentials there for terrain, right? Like, it's got all those gears that you can turn into stuff. It's got springs. It's got so many. It's such value. I used to be so excited when I'd find like an old watch or something nobody wanted, an old alarm clock. That was like the best. Because you just go crazy with it. It's the same with like pill bottles, with, you know, this silicone bottle right here. Like, if you just pay attention, you know, you're gonna find so much value in things that other people are like, well, that's junk. Like, no. I can repurpose it. I can give it new life, and actually make it more useful than it was before. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Oh man. Everybody and their spoilers. I mean, we gave you all 3 of the character cards last week. The missing trifecta from home. I don't know if there's too much left. Okay, where are we? So, we did that. Oh, 3 parts. His jaw is tiny, so asking about Rocket. I mean, the big reason there was so that we could keep his teeth. Because of how you can't, when a mold comes together, right? So a mold works like this. It's 2 plates, and it presses, and then you inject the plastic in and it fills all the cavities, right? So you can't have something like this, like a mouth that's open, and then have all those teeth with all these undercuts, because when the plastic fills, it's either going to fill that entire gap, or the mold, because of the way that it's cut, won't separate. It'll fuse together. That's why you can't have undercuts on like hard plastic, because when hard plastic sets, it doesn't bend, right? That's the big difference between, people call it soft plastic and hard plastic, like game board pieces and like the kind of miniatures that we make on the frames and stuff. The difference is that that plastic for like those one piece, or the soft plastic that people always talk about, when you pull it out, it pops right out, right? Because it bends, it flexes and it bends, and it will release. So you can do undercuts and things because the plastic will actually mold out. But when this stuff goes, it's like it's there forever. So you can't unmold it if there's like a little hook, right? Because the plastic will actually stop the mold from coming apart. So when you have something like Rocket's jaws, you either have to make it one solid chunk, or you have to separate it out so that you can get all that detail. So you can get those teeth to look really nice. And he's got small jaws, so you know there's only so many ways that you can cut that stuff. So that's why. The reason is because we wanted his mouth to be open, and we didn't want it to be filled with a chunk of plastic, and we wanted those teeth to look really nice. And the material that we work with requires that you can't actually do that in one part. So if you want high fidelity, sometimes you have to settle with a few more parts. And, you know, and it's a learning process for sure. Like every decision that we make and choice that we do when it comes to part count and molding is based on the information that we have available and what we know about what the pieces will tolerate and all of that. But the cool thing about, you know, anything really in life is that the more you do it, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the smarter and the better you get, the more innovation you can do. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, if we just change this or tweak this, now we can do it like this. And, you know, we're always going to do the absolute best that we can to make sure that the product and the experience for the hobby is as fun and as enjoyable and rewarding as it is at every step. What that means to everybody is obviously going to be different, but hopefully, you know, by this point, you guys have seen that our number one goal is always to do the best that we can and to give the most exciting and enjoyable, you know, miniature experience that we think is possible. And so that's the long-winded answer for Rocket's head. We wanted the little guy to be yelling. And so he was. Alright, I just gotta figure out this plate. Like this. Alright. Thanos me bro. I don't know. I think Josh would get really mad if I Thanos'd you. I feel like that would just get me yelled at. Endlessly. Endlessly. So for those wondering, after my long-winded explanation, I've switched to my Kunzanite alchemy. And I'm just knocking in stuff. Like Venom's horns, two questions mixed into one. Venom's knuckles, same thing. So if you look at a fist, whoop, you notice how your knuckles go down, right? If you look at most hard plastic fists that are one piece, they're like blocks. They're solid, right? There's no naturalness to the fist in the way you would hold a fist. So they look like big old cubes. And the reason that is because, again, if you do this, you wind up with these little undercuts that become problematic, like on the knuckles and stuff. So the way that it works is that if you cut by cutting that part, we were able to make a fist that actually looks like a fist, rather than having to do the classic like super block, the block hand as we call it. You know, and we thought that having something that looked, you know, like an actual real fist in that position on Venom was well worth the additional knuckle part. And again, that's a choice that we made, and I think that, you know, you don't immediately notice that stuff, but when you start comparing and looking at that thing, that's one of those details that just makes it look like you jumped out of the comics, because you have a very natural looking fist rather than this weird like chunky brick on your hand. Loki's horns, there's no way to do those horns that curve back like they do, and not have them immediately catch that mold if they're on the head. Like if you did the horns that way, they would look ridiculous. They, you know, because you'd have to avoid the undercut, you'd have to change the way that they curve back and all that stuff. It's a whole thing. Dallas is in the chat, so he can definitely, like, he could probably draw you a picture of what it would look like. But, you know, that's, again, these are the questions, right? If you want Loki and you want him to have horns, and you want those horns to look right, those horns have to be separate. Now, does that mean that, you know, 3 years from now, as we continue to get better and improve and learn and the technology improves and all this stuff, that there's not going to be a better way to do it than what we did? Maybe, right? But, you know, these are things that, like, just like with the hobby or anything else, you continue to improve and grow on, and you become smarter and better. And, you know, a little bit of time, patience, and I think, you know, you can get there. I've certainly seen a lot of really great looking Lokis, and I feel very confident and happy with the decision that we made. But again, it was our decision, and like I tell everybody, right? Like, it's a judgment call. It's an opinion, and the best we can do is do what we feel is best and is gonna, you know, make the most people happy and give us a really kick-ass looking character. So I'm not claiming that, you know, anybody's opinion is more right than anyone else's. It's just, there you go. You asked why? That's why. No! So obviously we talked about that Kunzanite Alchemy is really pink. It's kind of cool though. It's very poppy. But what I'll do is I'll just kind of like go through, and I'm going to glaze down that pink a little bit with some purple. And we're going to tone it back just a little bit. So that's a little less, it's a little less pink and a little more violet. A little more excitingly purple. All right, we got to do the metal arm, we got to do the face, we got to do the skin. Looks like I'm going to go back to my purple here really quick. I'm going to block in this. Chat's blowing up, I can see it, but I can't actually read it right now. Give me a second. And I'll be right back to you. I just want to finish this part. Okay, so there's our Nebula so far. It's looking pretty good, not bad for almost an hour. I have seen people use the Vallejo metallic mediums, but I have not used them. It looks pretty cool. I mean, the idea of being able to mix your metallics is pretty awesome. I know that it can be hard to do when you try to mix like a steel color, an already set steel color with another color, because the steel itself is white, so it really pastels out the color. Using inks is better. I've done that a couple of times. I know Dallas is pretty old hat with using inks to tint his metallics, but that's the way to go. I feel pretty confident in saying that no, despite what everyone wants, Ghost Rider's chain is probably not going to be every single link. I'm pretty confident it's going to be, you know, like a 1-part chain, but you know, there's still time. There's still time. We can adjust, I guess, based on our conversation here, guys. So you let us know. You have the power right now. The power. Oh my gosh. With playtesting, how many characters are you currently working on for future releases? Man, I need like a Pagani here. So we are well into like the end of next year, or mid next year is what we're playtesting, but as far as like concepts and all of that stuff, like we're well into 2022. So we have a lot. We got a lot on the horizon. We got a lot we want to do, a lot of really cool ideas. It's been really fun working with Marvel and getting to talk to them and kind of like sync things up in certain ways. They've been a blast. They've had a lot of really great suggestions. So yeah, we got a lot of cool stuff coming. Like so much cool stuff. And I'm excited to make Josh angry by spoiling it all at the appropriate time. And by appropriate time, I mean like a week earlier than he wants to. There's one question on there that I'm not allowed to answer, so I'm not going to. As far as like the releases and the delay and stuff goes, that's kind of still being discussed. Obviously, I think the most important thing is the same reason as to why Asmodee and we decided to postpone April releases. And, you know, a lot of that is like making sure that retailers and you guys, the players and stuff, are able to manage. You know, like we don't want, obviously the stay-at-home stuff and everything that's going on right now was a big factor to it. But then, of course, like when people get out of the shelter-in-place orders and business starts to pick back up, you know, just like it used to, and everybody gets to hang out and go around. Like, we don't want to flood everybody with all this stuff that, you know, maybe you can get, maybe you can't. So it's really all about making sure that everything is appropriate, right? We want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and that nobody's feeling overwhelmed by either how many things are out, budget, all of that stuff. So I don't really expect, and again, this is all subject to change because we're just chatting, but I don't really expect that all of a sudden May's going to roll around and, you know, you're just going to see this big dump of everything that would have come out. You know, it's going to be more carefully considered, and that's going to be a lot on Asmodee's side, talking with retailers, making sure that everybody can, you know, move back into it, right? So it's all about, you know, taking care of each other, the community, especially retailers and all that stuff. You know, we're really focused on that. Most of us either worked at a game store, owned a game store or a comic store, so like we've all been in those roles, and you know, it's something that we're always thinking about, like how do we make things great for the retailers and then for you guys as the players. How do we improve that experience? How do we make it so that, you know, everyone's going to see success and have fun with this stuff? All right. We got a little bit more time. I think. Oh, where do I want to go with her next? I'm just digging it. We got a lot of good base coats down. I'm gonna go back and pop these leather highlights, I think, once I figure out what color I want to do with that. I think I'll save her face and stuff for the next stream. So maybe we'll do that arm really quick. Let's do the arm. All right. So we're gonna start with a nice dark, so black metal from scale 75 in the alchemy range, and I'm just gonna base coat this on. The washing technique, not a great technique to use with metals. They don't make good washes. Oh, that one? That painting arm, what one is that? It's a Manfrotto. Manfrotto. 34C, 244. That's the, and then of course for the things that we put stands on, those are just microphone stands. So depending on which arm exactly you're looking for, the camera arm's a Manfrotto 244, and the ones that we just have the miniatures on are literally just microphone stands. Spare mic stands, as it were. I didn't do the research on these, on any of it. It was all Josh. I blame Josh for everything, like I normally do. Where did my paint go? Oh my gosh, I lost it. Oh, there it is. It's so dark I couldn't even find it. That might be why you clean your palette every once in a while. Psh. Sounds like it's for the weak to me. Here. That. Get this bionic arm going really nice. This robo arm, if you will. Base coat, these nice dark metallics. These. Those going. Kick those out. There we go. I think I'll just do the metallics on her head too. Got this going on. Oh, let's see. Come around the eye. This metal part here. Get this little cybernetic implant on the side of her head. Even though I know it's not actually like a dark steel, I'm going to hit this top fin thing. So that when I come back through with my probably blue metallic, it'll work out a lot nicer. There we go. The head has been started. Dun, dun, dun. All right. I mean, as far as like, so the question is, what inspires the characters more? I mean, the comics is definitely the primary source material, but you know, I think it always winds up being a little bit of a mix. There's great things that come out of the MCU that kind of inspire you and really capture the character super well. There are things, obviously, that are really intrinsic to the comics. You know, who can imagine a Captain America that doesn't do things all day, right? He is he's definitely like one of those ones where, you know, a lot of the greatness that people think of from the movies is actually born from the comics. And then some of the stuff that the comics do really well with him now has kind of been transferred from the movies. So it is a bit of a mix, like, back and forth. But, you know, at the end of the day, where we really come down is it's comics. You know, it always is. Can we find a really close approximation, or can we find the exact source material from the comic? Because the comic universe is the one we get to play in. And I think that's it's a fantastic one to play in because it's so big, right? Like, that's really where you want. And I see somebody's mentioning sibling rivalry, and that's a great example of, you know, an amazing moment in the MCU that is right at home in the comics as well. And so by doing something like that, we're able to kind of take this idea, this really recognizable idea from both worlds, and put it into the game, and everyone's in on the joke, you know. Whether you know Loki and Thor's, like, kind of serious brother sibling rivalry relationship from the comics only, or if you've, you know, enjoyed all of the movies and, you know, you lost your sense of sanity and laughter when that moment happened in the movie in Ragnarok, you know, it means the same to everyone. So I do like that idea. No, you move. Yeah, and there's another great one, right? Like, that whole speech from Civil War wound up getting used in the MCU, but in a different way. And so, you know, again, it goes back to that interplay and the way that these things work. And so I think to say, like, you're going to just do one without the other, like, philosophically, it just doesn't work. You know, and so that's like the big thing. But there we go. So here's our Nebula. I'm at my hour, so I'm sure Josh is like, get off, I've got things to do, even though he doesn't have to be here. But I do have other things that I have to do. I have a staff meeting I got to get ready for. But there you go. So again, to kind of go over what we did, we used a pin wash or just a general wash to get all the purples done and get them looking really great. I'm very happy with how those turned out. We used African Shadow on the leather. So next steps, we're going to go back and we'll do some little poppy highlights on the leather to give them, like, some life. We did Kunzanite Alchemy over the metallic spots for all of the armor plates. We'll go back with a purple wash and we'll kind of shade those back down so they're not quite so pink but have a nice, like, pop to them. We used Abyssal Blue as a wash over all the black areas, and I'm pretty happy with that. I don't even think I'm going to mess with that. I'm just going to leave it like it is. Because it's looking great. We have some nice blue shade in there. We've got some nice, like, stuff going on. So I think we're done with that. I'm going to have to give some thought to how I want to do the weapons, because we could just do them steel, but I feel like, you know, doing something fun with that would be pretty cool. So I don't know. We'll figure that out. And then, of course, we got to paint this big jet engine, and I got to figure out what I want to do with her skin. So we'll kind of figure that stuff out and go from there. But with that said, thank you guys so much for hanging out and being here. Hope you guys have a great week. Come back on Thursday, because this Thursday we're going to be having Dallas painting again from home. I don't know if he'll be finishing up his Corvus or if he'll be working on something else. But as always, we love hanging out with you guys. We love seeing you guys are safe. Continue to hit us up on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. As well as checking out the website. I think Josh is going to be posting a few more spoilers for you guys because we're at home right now, on Instagram and Twitter and maybe Facebook as well. So yeah, continue to paint, show us what you got, come back, hang out with us on Thursday, and then of course see me on Tuesday. We'll continue to do this for the remainder of the shelter in place and the quarantine, just hang out with you guys. Continue to have fun hobbying, be inspired. Hope you guys are looking forward to getting your hands on all the new releases come this May currently. And otherwise, be safe, enjoy your families, and watch out. We've got a lot more cool content that we're working on right now furiously for you guys to stay excited and engaged at home as well. So with that, I will say Thank you so much for joining me. You guys have a wonderful week, and we will see you back here on Thursday for our next stream. Cheers, guys.